sponsorship is not found anywhere in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. They didn't know to call it that. They, said that how important it was to work with others and that you can't keep it if you don't give it away. And but they never called it sponsorship. And Ebby was the man that took the message to Bill W. about how he had had a spiritual conversion and that he was free from alcohol. And that was actually the beginning of Bill W. getting sober. And, then he went to, had one more drunk, went to detox, had a spiritual experience. And from that point on, AA began. And then later on, that was in November, and later on in May, he met Dr. Bob, and who became the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And Ebby, who took the message to Bill, got a huge resentment going because he was never given credit for starting AA. And so in Lois, Bill W.'s wife, in her autobiography, she wrote about how Ebby was never really in AA. He was just around AA. He would show up, get another resentment going, drop out, and he had a hard time staying sober. And Ebby came from a very, very, very wealthy family, one of the wealthiest in the Northeast. And so they could have put him anywhere. But Bill took as good a care of him as he could. Bill was a steadfast friend of his for years. And the last thing that happened to Ebby was that Bill put him in a home in upper state New York. And that's where he died. And he died of emphysema. And that's the same thing that Bill W. died from, was emphysema. That's why when I decided to go into having my own treatment center, that I made the decision to treat all addictions, including smoking, because some of the greatest members of Alcoholics Anonymous have died from addiction. It doesn't matter whether you smoke it or drink it or eat it or shoot it up. Addiction is addiction. And he died from, both men, Ebby and Bill W. both died from an addiction to nicotine, from emphysema from nicotine. Bill also was a womanizer. He had a long-term affair, 15-year, and when she was interviewed, she said that she wasn't the first one. So in today's time, those guys perhaps could have gotten treatment, because there is what we recognize today as sex addiction as being an addiction like any other addiction, and it has to be treated as such if you want help. So, and then if you have other addictions, you must get a sponsor. Go to that particular program and get a sponsor in each of the addictions that you suffer from. Because if you try to treat an eating disorder, if you're an alcoholic and have an eating disorder, unless you have a sponsor that has both, they will not be able to understand the eating part. They'll say, well, just go have a Snickers bar, or go, it's not, at least you're not drinking. So this is why it's so important to get with like kind to find help, and in order to find a good sponsor is, like I said, the sponsorship was really named the name came out of Dr. Bob's group. And I actually wrote a pamphlet on it. And the pamphlet was very strict, had real strict rules, but nearly everything that came out of those early days was very strict and rigid. It is not that so rigid today. What is a sponsor is what we say is, when you're looking for a sponsor, it's kind of like when you're looking for a spouse. If a woman is looking for a husband, find a well-mothered man. And if he hasn't been mothered in a healthy way, make sure he's had some good therapy. Because that's what you're going to get as a spouse is the either way, man or woman. And so with that in mind, keep in mind to find a well-sponsored sponsor. Because if you get a newcomer or get someone that doesn't have a sponsor, you're in trouble. And so, find a well-sponsored sponsor, and what it will form is a legacy. And when, a good sponsor is someone that has been around for a while. Now, there are a lot of programs that are fairly new, and particularly in towns where there's not a lot of meetings or maybe not any old timers. And so, but the best way to find a sponsor is to find someone that is seasoned, someone that is in the program, one that has what you want. If you don't want what they have, don't choose them for a sponsor. And I always like to know there's one thing: people can show up at meetings and be just absolutely wonderful. But what about their home life? What about on the job? How do they carry forth in their daily life? So you may not always know that on the front end, but if you ask someone to be your sponsor and that their life is in turmoil, some people get a high off of sponsoring. So just be aware. Pray before you pick a sponsor. And it is okay to change sponsors. But right now I want to talk about, when picking a sponsor, this is universal, is men sponsor men and women sponsor women. Now, for gay people, there is guidelines for that. If you're a lesbian, you might want to find a gentleman that's someone in the program to sponsor you, vice versa. Get with like kind, because what can happen is, you don't want a romance to spring up in sponsorship. That's why men sponsor men, women sponsor women. And then, like I said about long-term sobriety, at least a year. Now, in some communities, like when we first started Overeaters Anonymous here in Abilene, we were all kind of sponsoring each other. If we were 30 minutes ahead of the other one, well, we just all kind of hung in there together. I did drive to Fort Worth for meetings for about a year and got a sponsor there, and brought a lot of that back to Abilene with me. And that wasn't me doing it; it was me wanting to get well, and God directed everything. So get someone that is seasoned, and get someone that you like what they have. I mean, why would you want to pick someone that you didn't like what they have? See what they're, like I just said, see what their life is like in general. Because how they show up in meetings may not be how they show up at home or in the workplace. And then I've already said this: get a well-sponsored sponsor. And then pick someone, if you can, that has a broad interest in the program. Someone that does service work, someone that goes to other meetings, the area meetings, someone that maybe goes to conferences. Some of the best times that I can ever remember in life in sobriety with my husband and I is we had a whole group that we ran around with. A lot of them were single, some of them were not, some of them were married. But Chuck C was the main, he was a wonderful speaker, and He was the sponsor of my husband's sponsor. And so we went to conferences all over the United States, and we'd all group up together and go have a wonderful time because you can have fun in the program and you will remember it the next day, regardless of what your addiction is. And I know in OA, I've always had so much fun. We used to take our clients to Dallas every year for the conference up there, and it's good to get with other people and know what they're doing and fellowship. The fellowship of the program is much more than just going to meetings. The fellowship is outside the meetings. And this is where a good sponsor is going to help you get connected outside of the meetings. And but also a good sponsor is someone that is congenial, that is easy to talk to, and is a good listener. Be aware if you get someone that is so up into themselves that they never give you a chance to talk. And you will find sponsors like that will spend all their time talking. And so there needs to be a balance. Someone that is easy to get along with, and not necessarily easy to get along with, I'm going to backtrack on that, just someone that has what you want and you're willing to listen to them, and that they're willing to listen to you. And then think about trustworthy. It is so important to find someone that is trustworthy, because the sponsorship is one of the purest relationships that there is on the face of the earth. Think about it. It's someone that you are going to build up a trust in, because they're going to share their life with you as you share your life with them, and they will take you as far in the program as they have gone. Now, if you've got a sponsor that is trying to tell you how to get back from New York City and they've never been there, be aware. I mean, that's, if they're trying to tell you something that they haven't done. See, I'm big on the traditions, and a lot of people don't like the traditions. They are, they are kind of dry, but I'll tell you, without those traditions, AA would not be we would have lost out a long time ago, because addicts get together and they fuss and fight and they want their own way and blah, 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 and their traditions evolved out of problems. And a good sponsor, I know the first thing and I've been in Al-Anon for 14 years when my husband first sobered up. And I did know some things about the steps. I'd worked them. I had, was living them, and, but it wasn't my place to share my program with my husband. It was my place to live it in the home and outside the home. And when he went to this first meeting, he said, I don't know what my wife has, but I want what she has gotten here. So that's a high compliment for an Al-Anon. But anyway, his first sponsor lived up in Norman, Oklahoma, and he would come down once a month because he had several sponsorees here. And we were at a conference, in fact, and this man came up to my husband and said, do you have a sponsor? And RL might have had 3 weeks in the program. I don't know how I drug him to that conference. I don't know. But anyway, and so the man asked him, do you have a sponsor? And he said, no. And he said, well, you do now. So he lived at Norman, Oklahoma, but he'd come down once a month and he'd have us coming up there. And but first time he came to our home, he set us down at the table, kitchen table, and he knew that we had a house full of kids. And he told RL, he said, okay, you need to start running your home by the golden rule. The man that makes the gold makes the rules. Most alcoholics in the disease, they give up. And it doesn't mean run your family, but it means begin to step up whether you're a mother or a father, step up and become a parent, step up and become a spouse. And he gave RL some really good direction. And he had both of us use the 12 traditions in raising our children and running. If you want to know how to run a smooth home, go by the traditions. And I mean, even a 2-year-old, like the 7th tradition says, contribute, everyone contributes, make, what it is, I can't even quote it this morning, I've quoted it 1,000 times, but everyone is expected to make a contribution in the family or in the program, and that's how it is in the family. If a 2-year-old can help pick up the newspapers in the living room, let them. Let each child be a part of the household. Like each member of a fellowship of a 12-step program, if you want good sobriety, become a member of a fellowship. Hang out and become a member by doing good service work. But it does start with a good sponsor. So getting back to sponsorship, find someone that's trustworthy, because a good sponsor is someone that more than likely you will give your 4th step, your inventory to. And you don't want someone going out and telling everyone in the world about your 5th step. So find someone that's trustworthy. And one of the ways that you can do that, it's a little tricky, but if you really want to know if someone's trustworthy, give them some information, something that won't harm you one way or the other. Give them some information and see how long it takes it to get back to you. If they go out and gossip and gossip and gossip, and then someone will probably think enough of you to come back and tell you, so-and-so is saying this about you. But anyway, trustworthy. And then a sponsor is objective, in that they can step back. They don't get so emotionally involved. I say that, but they don't get so emotionally involved in the problem. They get involved, their job is to be there with you and for you and listen, but they're not going to take the problem off of you. They're not going to take the problem away from you. And you don't choose someone to be your sponsor. We have people all the time on, can my wife be my sponsor? Can my husband be my sponsor? Can my best friend? No, no, and no. No, you cannot pick someone that close to you, because they can't be objective. And so get someone that can see you through the lens, the eyes of, I love Chuck C's book, A New Pair of Glasses, but choose someone that can see you through the eyes of recovery, their recovery. And keep in mind, they can only take you as far as they've gone. So another thing is, find someone that has a little backbone, someone that can be tough in certain situations. Someone who will tell you the truth and not be afraid that it will hurt your feelings, and someone that will hold you accountable. If you've got a sponsor, and I was thinking, I've had 5 sponsors throughout my time from 1968 to now, and I'm without a sponsor now, but I'm looking for one anyway. And all 5 of them have passed away except one, and she has Alzheimer's, and she doesn't know anything right now. So, and then you can have more than one sponsor. I had 5 sponsors, but I had to get a sponsor in Al-Anon. I needed to get a sponsor in OA. And then when I picked up a chip in AA, I had to get a sponsor in AA. But besides that, I had several sponsors through the years in different programs, because they would either relapse or had passed away or something. But find someone that can tell you the truth. Like I said, when they were all living and everything was good, I had three main sponsors. And if I had a real big problem, I would call one. And I don't care what I did and how mad I got at my husband and how much I'd cussed him and threatened to kill him and all that. She would just listen and she'd say, well, I understand, honey. Well, maybe you have to do that. I mean, just so appeasing to me, just so sweet. I love to talk to her because she agreed with everything I said. So I'd usually call her first. And then I knew not to do what she did, but she would just kind of love me where I was at, and I needed that at that time. And then after a while, I'd get miserable enough to call the second one. And the second one would take me to the the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and give me page numbers and read this and write that and call me back and all that. And then I would do that, but I'd still be in the midst of the problem. And then I'd finally call the third one, and she was not nice. She was never very nice to me. She'd say, you get up off of your blankety blank, you know what, and get yourself to a meeting. I'll meet you at the open door, or I'll meet you at the Episcopal Church. I'll do, you're sitting on the pity pot, get off of it. She'd really tell me the truth. So it took a cluster, it took a group for me. And I miss those women every single solitary day. I had one that died the year before my husband did, and we talked to each other every morning at 5 o'clock for over 20 years. And what happens in sponsorship, and it's almost like they become a member of your family. They get to know your children, you get to know their family, and it's like the big book says, you'll watch a fellowship grow up around you. If you're as miserable in sobriety as you were in using, whatever substance you were using, something's wrong. A sponsor will help lift you up. Now, about the time they lift you up, they will get tough with you, and how they get tough is if they'll tell you the truth and they'll hold you accountable, like I just talked about. And then another thing is find someone with compassion. It's good to have someone that's tough, but also someone with compassion, and someone that can say, well, this is what happened to me. This is what happened to me. And I had sponsors that everything I did, they would say, well, let me tell you, the same thing happened. And this is what my sponsor said. Because you're going to have like grand sponsors. If you stay in this deal long enough and you have a sponsor, their sponsor, if your sponsor's out of town, they'll say, call my sponsor. And so you gather up a whole cluster of people to help you. And so find someone that also has compassion. Yeah, they can be tough when it's needed, but there are some sponsors that make you scared of them. I've seen it for so many years through the program, and I was scared enough of myself. That didn't work for me to have someone to scare me to death. But I did need someone because even back when I was very shy, I still was, pretty strong-willed, so I needed someone that could help me break through that being so strong-willed. I wanted the program, and I wanted to do it my way, and that doesn't work. That does not work. So, all right, compassion is another thing. And then the main thing is someone that can take you through the steps. Now, if they haven't been through the steps, they cannot take you through the steps. So that is very important for you to know. And I do know in small communities or small groups, scrambling around looking for sponsors, and what happened during the old days, because there were not people to work with each other. You know, there was a group in California, there's a group in New York City, Akron, Ohio. There wasn't very many around. And so what they called it is Highway AA or Highway OA, to get someone that is out of town and use the phone, and then meet up periodically. So there's different ways that you can do sponsorship. Yes, you know, one of the best things is to have someone that you go to meetings with and they see you and you see them. But when we first started OA back, there wasn't anyone qualified to be a sponsor because we were all new. And so, you know, like I said, I went to Fort Worth, I got a sponsor and started working the steps again. I'd already worked them, but I didn't work them abstinent. And it does help to be clean and sober when you're working the steps. That's what's recommended. But sometimes we, you know, got to the point that if you had completed the first 7 steps, you could take people as far as you have been there. So find a well-sponsored sponsor. Find someone that not only has gone through the steps, that can take you through the steps, but that lives the steps on a daily basis. That's entirely different. Okay, so what is a sponsor not? What is not a good sponsor? A sponsor is not a banker. There are not people there to loan you money, and vice versa. You have to be careful. Newcomers do, and I don't have any real newcomers here, but newcomers in AA, particularly in NA, be aware, because yes, there's a lot of healthy people in the 12-step programs, and there are some sick people in the 12-step programs. So be aware. I'll give you an example. My husband was in the oil business, and when he started in AA, for whatever reason, they thought he was some wealthy oil man. I'll promise you he wasn't. He was just in the oil business, but made us a good living. But anyway, there was a group, 3 or 4 of them, in AA, and we thought they were kind of pillars of, we didn't know. They just were there all the time. Anyway, they came to him and then to me wanting to sell us stock in an oil rig. And this is a smart man. He was a very smart man. But he thought, well, they're in AA, they're honest. He wrote them out a check for $30,000. And then my son, who was 18, who had worked hard and saved every penny, turned over $10,000 to them to buy shares in this oil rig. And we were pretty pleased with ourselves. We were just going to sit back and wait for the money to come in. And by the grace of God, my sponsor came by that night. They'd been out to Buffalo Gap to eat. We did not live here then. And her sponsor, who was like the matriarch of Alcoholics Anonymous, came and by. And so Ariel was telling Jackie about this wonderful thing that his sponsor, not his sponsor, a group had got us into, this oil deal, and that she probably would want to join it. And she started cussing a blue streak. She said, "Where's your telephone?" She went in and she called all 3 of them. She knew that they were scam artists, and they had done this with other newcomers that looked like they had a little money. So we learned our lesson real early. We got the money back. Jackie got on there, and she had them to bring those checks back. By the grace of God, they had deposited them. That was that night. So anyway, be aware. Be aware that there's a whole bunch of people all grouped up together trying to get well, and some of them are still sick. So, be aware, particularly newcomers. And so don't be anyone's banker, and don't ask your sponsor to be your banker. Now, occasionally, early in sobriety, if someone is on the streets, a good sponsor may help them a little bit financially. but that is very precarious. You have to be very careful with that. All right, so, and a sponsor is not a marriage counselor. Do not go to, now, there's an and a but with every one of these. If you've got a sponsor that both parties or that coupleship is in the program, then a lot of times, like we started like sponsoring couples. That was way before the Recovering Couples program started. But she'd be in Al-Anon and he'd be in AA, and how we would sponsor them is I'd sponsor her and she'd, anyway. And then we visited, we became, because when you first are in sobriety, a lot of times you lose all those friends, that you drank with and all. So you had to find a whole new group of friends. So, but remember, you're not a marriage counselor, nor is a sponsor a therapist. Now, they may be a therapist, but they're not your therapist. And this is where therapists have to, like, I'm what we call a double header. I work in the field, but then I'm also a member of the fellowship. That's two different things. I work in the field, but I'm a member of the fellowship. And Dr. Hollis, Judy Hollis, who was my therapist in treatment, said you must go to meetings, and you must go to meetings in town when y'all get them started. Still go to your open AA meetings, go to Al-Anon, but you are a member of the fellowship. Don't go in there thinking you know something, because I was the first one in this area that ever got help for an eating disorder, and everyone wanted to know something. And she said, you don't know anything. Keep your mouth shut. You are not a therapist when you walk into that meeting. And that is not a place to get clients. You're very clear about that. And so don't try to be, and don't try to get your sponsor to be your therapist, because that's not what it's for. It is to help you stay clean and sober and abstinent in the program. And then don't expect them to be your lawyer. Now, there's a lot of good lawyers in the program, but they do not need to be your lawyer. If you need a lawyer, if they know of someone, they might recommend someone. And a good sponsor, if you've got legal problems, I'll tell you, a good sponsor will stand with you. They'll even go to court with you. They'll take a stand with you, as a support, but they are not going to do it for you. I've gone to court with many people. My husband did, as a support, but not as, as a lawyer at all. And so you might not necessarily wind up being best friends. Sometimes when you have a sponsor, you do become best friends. But what you will come out with regardless of is, like I said to begin with, it is the purest relationship that you can have ever in the world, because a real sponsor is there. If you want to know what your sponsor is there for, it's to save their own life. It's to give them another day of recovery. If you think that they're there all about you and love and care about you, they will. They'll grow to love you, but they're there to save themselves, because if you don't give it away, you can't keep it. What I do here, what I do over at Shades, that is not my 12-step work. That's not. I have always had a few sponsorees. I had 3 and 1 died, and I've got 2, and but they live out of state. And one does not even know, I don't think today, that she still knows what I do for a living. We keep it so separate, but we sponsor in order to save ourselves. And we can't save anyone else, but we can certainly support them, be there for them even after a relapse. Relapse is a high priority. We hope no one ever relapses. But when you do relapse, a good sponsor will walk through that with you. So that's what I have about sponsorship. And if you haven't had that kind of relationship, you have missed the joy of the program. Meetings are great, meeting a lot of people, going to conferences is great, but there's nothing like it is a spiritual, beloved experience to have a sponsor. And that's what Bill W. called Ebby, was his beloved, because he so loved him for carrying him the message. That's all our job is as sponsors, is to carry the message of recovery to another suffering person. So with that, I will close. Who has questions? How have you worked with your sponsor? How have you worked with sponsorees? And I will tell you, if you're in the program and you have a sponsor, I hope your sponsor will encourage you to sponsor people, because you don't know what you have until you start giving it away. And you think, well, I didn't even know that I knew that. And that will reinforce your own recovery. And so just remember, God won't take you any farther than you're willing to go, and neither will a good sponsor. So who wants to say something about sponsorship?